Welcome to Beyond the Blend, the podcast that goes behind the science and talks to the people at the heart of the lubricant market, telling the real story of the people who make the lubricant market move. With real insight and honest conversations, we aim to show off the people side from across the entire lubricant supply chain. Join me, Steve Knapp, and Rob Taylor as we delve behind the scenes of the lubricant industry. All content, views and opinions expressed by Sophie belong solely to her and do not reflect or represent Shell plc. Let's start with a quick 5 from 5. Sophie, vacation or staycation?
Vacation.
Attend a party or host a party?
Definitely attend.
Roller coasters or water slides?
Ooh, roller coasters, particularly Disney ones.
Dancing or singing?
Singing.
Start work late or leave work early?
Ideally, neither. Probably leave work early.
Fantastic. Sophie Wand, welcome to Beyond the Blend. It's great to have you here. I'm very much looking forward to learning more about you. But as we kick this off, maybe just introduce yourself to the folks that are listening in and tell them who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your background.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. I was so delighted to be invited. I've been listening to the podcast and it's been really interesting just to hear different perspectives, and I'm excited to share my own. So I am currently a sales and marketing advisor at Shell within the Lubricants UK Indirect team. What does that actually mean? So it's a sort of double-headed role. I'm both on the sales side, so I'm territory managing for the South, which means that I focus pretty entirely on the automotive sector in the UK, so the automotive aftermarket, working with our main distributor, Euro Car Parts. So means I get to essentially go out to independent garages and meet the end customer and hopefully show them the benefits of why Shell is the best oil on the market and why they should partner with us. And then on the flip side, I also help out with the marketing side. So using things like trying to make more portfolios, sales presenters, arranging different events that we attend, managing our social media and all of that kind of digital side of things as well. It's part of the Shell Commercial Graduate Programme. So that is a 3-year programme, which I'm very lucky to be on, which gives me a good understanding of all the different sort of commercial functions within Shell. Prior to that, I did philosophy and politics at Edinburgh for uni, which is, again, a very probably quite strange background for someone now working in lubricants. But I really enjoyed it, and I would consider myself very kind of academic, really into learning and just, anything when it comes to reading or understanding industries and the world a bit better. So that's kind of my experience thus far. This is my second job within Shell. So, I started out as an intern in 2021, I think it was. So during COVID, which was a little bit sad in my penultimate year of uni. And that was kind of marketing for mobility within Shell. So very, very different from what we're doing. So working more on nature-based solutions and selling carbon credits to customers. And then I went into the low carbon fuels business, which was working in strategy and business development, which was, again, absolutely worlds away from what I'm doing now. No sight of a customer whatsoever, but it was much more about energy transition and trying to build up Shell's low carbon fuel projects. So it was really interesting, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now. But that's kind of a very high level overview of where I'm at now in my career.
Wow. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've sort of recruited some grads when I worked at Shell, and you see that sort of breadth of what you've experienced already as you started to describe that. I find that really, really empowering to listen to, that you've already started to see very different aspects of the lubricant industry, or of the energy industry, right? The big difference between the strategic parts and the customer, the sales and marketing side of things. Did you ever imagine that you would be in the sales and marketing side as part of the program? Because it's so different from the strategic part, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I love analyzing things and, trying to understand really difficult problems. And I think energy transition is probably one of the most difficult problems facing humanity at the moment. So I really enjoyed that, but I always knew going into it that I wanted early on in my career to do something that was salesy and to be in front of the customer, because ultimately, I think if you want to have a successful energy business or any kind of business, you need to really understand your customers and you need to have that direct customer experience, because I feel very privileged now that I can say that I have been in front of customers who have been actively probably don't really want to talk to you, really busy, want to do other stuff with their lives, want to move on, want to have a cup of coffee instead of chatting about why they should use Shell, and having to actually navigate that conversation with the end customer. And I think that I hope will lend itself positively to future career paths for me. But yeah, I love the sales side and I really wanted to push myself in that direction, because I think particularly in such a big company like Shell, there's just, despite it being so massive, there's not very many roles in which you can actually directly talk to customers. So much of our interface with customers is sort of through a screen or through the forecourts or through trading channels. But I think having something where you can directly go to the customer in lubricants is really unique as an opportunity. So I've been incredibly grateful to have that thus far.
Well, I'm very biased, but I tend to think anybody that's got the customer on their CV has experienced things that just being in an office. Now, it doesn't devalue the roles of being in an office at all, but I think if you've got that customer intimacy part on your CV and in your experiences, I'm with you. I think it adds a dimension that, should always remain with you, right?
Yeah, it's so difficult as well, I think, when particularly being based in London, being in the Shell Centre, that's where I am at the moment, which is a great place to be, but it's very easy, I think, to get sort of siloed into your London office bubble versus remembering who is actually, who's paying the bills at the end of the day, who's the one actually providing Shell with our funding, and that's the customer. So I feel like I now understand that a little bit better in a very, very small part of the Shell pie. But
yeah. Well, I can imagine going into a Euro car parts workshop. They're not really bothered about your Shell London bubble, are they?
No, absolutely not. And they're always wondering, why is this posh little girl walking into my workshop? What on earth does she want to be here?
I love it. Well, there's some stories I'm sure we can dig into there. But let's go back a bit, because Edinburgh University, or University of Edinburgh, to give it its correct construction, and of course, being a premier university, the Shell Association, the two things, I can see why Shell would find looking into that university a great pull. But what attracts a young female into an environment that you've already described around energy transition being the biggest problem or opportunity, problem perhaps, that faces humanity, is I think what you said. So what made Shell an attractive proposition to you?
That's a great question. I think, in all honesty, I was really exploring lots of different industries, different options. I remember a very sort of pivotal week in my life, I suppose, having a week of 3 interviews. This was for the internship kind of stage. One was at Shell, one was at CNN to do producing on the news, which would have been really awesome. And the other was Penguin Random House Publishing, which were 3 completely different areas. But I feel very lucky that I'm a person who has very wide interests. I love current affairs, I love reading, just learning new things. But I think what attracts me to Shell the most is partly its breadth. I think it's very easy as a consumer not to realize just how many pies Shell has its fingers in. People see the retail sites and they see the forecourts and they assume that that's all that Shell is. But actually, it is so varied, multifaceted. There are so many different things you can do. I mean, firstly, things like trading, which I didn't even think that Shell did trading before joining, particularly lubricants. I mean, I probably would have thought it was KY jelly if you'd asked me what lubricant was in 2021. So there's lots of learning to do in the industry. And I think the problem of climate change is always something that I have been really passionate about. At school, I used to, gosh, it's kind of embarrassing really, but I would invite members of the Green Party. I was very active politically and I felt really passionate about it because, it's something which not only will affect my generation, but will affect my children, grandchildren, etc. It really is a fundamental problem that is facing the world. And the reason why I wanted to be in Shell might feel slightly counterintuitive for some people to understand, but I wanted to be a part of the solution. And I think to do that, you have to understand the industry itself, why we're in this position, what the routes are out of that. And along the way, I wanted to learn lots of skills, and I've been to Italy, I've been to the Netherlands, had great travel opportunities. So I think what I wanted going into it was understanding the energy industry and making a change in it. And I hope that I will have more opportunities to do that in my career at Shell.
Well, I think the more and more people that we can bring into the industry with the passion that you've clearly got around it, that takes this sort of deeper and broader view of what it means, right? Because it is easy, isn't it, to say, well, how can you work for Shell because you're the problem?
Yeah.
And whilst I guess superficially you can look in and say, well, I see that we contribute to the problem. Only when you're in it are you probably closer to what really is going on and what needs to happen. But within that, you come into a space where maybe your friends or your family or people you're associated with, maybe public, I don't know, treat your move into Shell a little bit negatively or with surprise. Have you had to handle any of that?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I come from a family of doctors, so both my parents are doctors. My brothers are both doctors, as are their wives, etc., etc. So we're a very sort of public service minded kind of family. And I think going into Shell, I certainly heard, the term shell out quite frequently. Why are you selling your soul to the devil, etc., which is never how I viewed it. And it's still not how I view it. But I think more than that, there's the whole climate element of it. But I think also what attracts me is the fact that energy is something that is so necessary to our day-to-day lives. And I wanted to do something which actually does benefit people. And where we get our energy from really matters. But having energy in the first place, keeping the lights on, keeping you warm in the winter, all these things that we do take for granted, even climate activists will hopefully heat their homes, etc. So those sort of things, I wanted to be in an industry that actually does something. And I think amongst graduate roles in particular, there's not to denigrate industries like consulting, etc., but I wanted to be part of a company which had a product that people actually require and that actually makes a meaningful impact on their day-to-day lives, and hopefully make a product that is also good for the environment, which is tough to do, but it's an interesting challenge, I think. And it gives lots of potential paths and opportunities moving forward as well.
Yeah. I reflect in, as you know, I worked in Shell for a number of years, and I saw behavioural changes taking place when I worked with the company about reducing things that were in our control. So travel, and whilst Zoom became a big thing in lockdown, actually video conferencing in Shell was something that was done a long time ago, and it wasn't a new skill. So you're probably seeing, I guess, innovation as well as sustained and embedded behaviors around the energy transition. I'm thinking about sort of these people who are saying to you, you shell out, and clearly there's a response to that, and that response is about your personal direction and drive that can be robust and resilient to that. Yeah, how do you articulate that?
I think a company is only as good or as valuable as its people. And I think the people that I know at Shell, as well as I hope myself, but the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, they are all very motivated to try and make change and to try and innovate in a positive way, make a positive impact. I think I really take it for granted, to be honest, being at Shell, but it is an incredibly friendly culture. There is something I think about being a sort of Shell person. I've heard people say that there is a kind of personality type that we have at Shell, and I think that reflects in the fact that we are all trying to make change. Obviously, we are trying to do that within the confines of having certain commitments to governments, to shareholders, to the environment. We have lots of different stakeholders that we have to keep happy, which I think can be difficult to make sure that everyone is happy, therefore. But I think when people challenge me on it, I will say everyone I know is very motivated to deliver energy transition. Obviously, we are going to be the plan is to be a net zero company by 2050. And I have every confidence that we'll achieve that because we are investing so much in energy transition, whether it's in EV charging, whether it's in low carbon fuels, my previous role, even just trying to generate efficiencies in the upstream businesses, which we maybe don't talk about, but actually the transition to gas from crude oil is one of the main levers in which we can reduce our emissions. So I think there's so many different ways in which we are making an impact. And I think comparing us to our competitors as well, you'll see that Shell are actually delivering much more than a lot of our competitors in that area. And so I think that helps somewhat. Now, some people don't want to be convinced, which is their prerogative, but I think realizing that we're trying to deliver more cleaner energy to more people globally, I think it's a very complex problem. And we're getting towards a solution, albeit perhaps a slight wavy pathway there, but I think it will happen.
I mean, and we won't hover much longer on the energy because I think there's so much more to talk about. But I think it's really great to hear, there is a resolute nature in your position, and I think what's really good when I listen into that is, if people like you at your age and at your point in your career believe it, it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Where there was this whole learning and creating, what does it look like? And not as much happened. So I think the pace and what people like yourself bring into it is clearly much more committed and driven. So thanks for sharing that side of things. But let's do sort of go a little bit sort of into the Shell friendly culture. How does it feel, right? Coming out of academia, moving into this big corporate environment where there might have been a bit of apprehension, I don't know, walking in the doors, and you've mentioned this friendly culture that you've experienced. How's it been so far? The mix between being on the grad scheme, going to the Euro car part workshops, this whole balance. How's it been, this friendly culture? What does it look like?
I think it manifests itself in lots of different ways. I think walking in the door, the fact that you find it a lot easier to talk to people, I guess. I mean, obviously you've got something in common. We both work at Shell, so, you sort of are in each other's worlds a little bit. But I think from my end, it's been great the way in which you can openly reach out to people a lot more senior than you and know that they actually want to develop you. I think part of that helps when you say that you're on the grad program, so you're already hopefully kind of in a position in which you are expected to progress in the organization. So I think being able to reach out to a vice president to a senior vice president and pop in a get to know you, or GTKY. That's there are lots of Shell acronyms, as I'm sure you will remember, lots of acronyms, and being able to make those connections and not be sort of talked down to is really great. And again, easy to take for granted in the context of having not worked other places. I think everyone is really willing to help each other. And that I really like as well. You know, if I'm not sure about something, I don't feel embarrassed to ask people. And if I do feel embarrassed, I think the personal learning has been that that's a me problem and that I actually need to build up the confidence to reach out to them because they are actually incredibly friendly. And that goes across the organization, I think, and even internationally. I think, obviously, being based in London, you see lots of people in the London office, but you can reach out to people in Houston, in Bangalore. I was talking to someone in Beijing earlier this morning. So everyone is really happy to give you their time. And I think that contributes more to feeling like you are part of this little Shell, well, I wouldn't say family maybe, but maybe that's a little bit strong, but you are part of the Shell community, and that feels really lucky to be a part of it.
I mean, you speak so positively about that. And one of the things on the Beyond the Blend podcast that we're looking to, I guess, explore, I wouldn't say expose or maybe even dispel, but we're looking to show how diversity plays out across the lube space, the energy space. We're focusing on lubricants and the Euro car parts that clearly connects. How does that seem to you, right? So coming out of academia, which is going to have a real, sort of natural and probably a very realistic gender balance to an environment that could be perceived by some as being quite dominated by males of European nature. So how would you observe that as somebody young and female moving into that environment?
It's funny. I think within Shell, it's actually, in my experience at least, very even when it comes to the gender balance. And amongst the graduates, at least in the commercial grad program, I think it's probably 60-40 ratio female to male, which is really great to see. And I think it's because Shell are really keen to try and increase the roles of women and to try and break glass ceilings, etc., and move people up the organization a little bit more. And I think that's really great to see. And even within our team, my general manager is a female and is a really strong leader, as was my VP as well. So it does permeate across the organization. And I think we get a lot of exposure to female leaders, which is something that I really value, and having those people to sort of look up to and thinking, oh, I suppose it's not actually unfeasible to reach those positions as a female is really great to see. I think it's been really interesting in my current role because I'm so exposed to the automotive industry. Now, even though lubricants falls into the automotive industry in the way that we supply them, lubricants is part of the energy industry, really, as an oil product. And I think the energy industry has the benefit when it comes to female recruitment in particular nowadays, but just recruitment of young people is the energy transition element. People want to be a part of that. And it's something that young people, and in particular young women, are very passionate about. And I think that's a way to draw women into the lubricants industry. However, the automotive industry can be a slightly different picture sometimes. And there's still a perception that the automotive industry is for men. It is only white men with, greasy overalls on, and there's no place for women. Women can't even change tires. There's a lot of, I think, negative perceptions about the role of women in that industry. And so I think the gender divide has been very different working in automotive. But that being said, I've been really pleasantly surprised by it. I really expected it to be a lot more male dominated than it is. And don't get me wrong, there's still a very long way to go in the automotive industry to having gender parity. But I think that we are actually making really meaningful steps towards it. And I think that the industry is taking steps to raise the role of women. And I think that Shell should be a part of helping that and of helping the change and sharing our learnings from energy with the automotive industry. I think it's one of those things that will slowly change, but we have a little bit more of a way to go when it comes to that side of the industry.
Yeah. I mean, that, just as a visual representation, 60-40. I mean, that's something that you can see and observe, which I guess makes things, very, very visible and clear that there's been a deliberate change in how that is shaped up. And you were talking about general managers, vice presidents. Equally, that I think is great to see those role models, I'd imagine, right? So that there's real tangible evidence that opportunities is there in real terms. And I know for somebody that's the father of 3 daughters, that would be a very important thing, that they could see success, that they could see it in front of them. But it doesn't come cheap, right? So you still have to work hard. And do you feel within that space, do you feel that the expectation, like you carry into the role, you're a graduate, right? So you've got the doors open of the VPs and the senior vice presidents. You're on the fast track. She's going to be good. Do you see this playing out, and how do you handle that side of things? I'm interested in how you manage that.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange. I would have thought that I would have felt, being in an industry that has a perception of being very male dominated, that I would experience more negative things in the workplace around my gender. But it's been great in the sense that when I'm in the hallowed walls of Shell Centre, I have never felt in any way like my gender has been not even an issue, but something that, has ever sort of held me back. In a way, it's given me something that I care about, in the sense of I care about increasing the role of women, and I think that's really important. But I've been very lucky to not experience anything negative in that regard. I think it's maybe a slightly different picture when I'm out of workshops or when I'm with our distributors, but I feel very lucky that I've never had to, thankfully, navigate any sort of awkwardness around people making comments they shouldn't do, or all that sort of thing. And I think that's just a testament to what's come before. And I think it's very easy to forget that it's not always been like this. And that, talking to the VPs, they will tell you that back in whatever day they were a graduate, they had a very different experience, and that they really had to fight to be where they are now. And I think it's great that because of the work of those women, and men, of course, as well, who have really played a very important, pivotal role in Shell of bringing up women. It's not something that I think we should be saying is the role of women to sort of mentor each other. It's a role of, we should all be playing a part in that. And I think that we're very fortunate as graduates now to be in an environment where that isn't an issue anymore. Thus far.
and I would say anybody listening in from the Shell recruitment team, if they're hearing this endorsement that you have around how that's been, because I'm hearing somebody that's found their place where they can make their mark around the energy transition. They see role models around female leaders that they can aspire and to join side by side, and a place where they feel that they're part of the culture they want to be part of. So I guess this question is a bit redundant, because I was going to say, how's it been for you? But I guess it's been a wholly positive experience. So maybe we'll reframe that. Where do you see it going? Where do you see the next rotation or the future areas of excitement for you in this space?
Oh, it's tough. I've been thinking a lot about it recently. I mean, I'm sort of nearing-ish the end of my graduate program, which feels crazy to think, because it feels like just yesterday that I was starting out. But I think in terms of next steps of where I want to go to, I mean, what I really want to make an impact in is energy transition. And I want to be on my deathbed and say that I've done something positive to help future generations, which I thought meant, oh, I need to go and join solar. I need to be in wind. I need to be in the low carbon solutions business. And I realize that's not actually the case now, which has opened up a lot of doors. I think for me, my area of interest would potentially be e-mobility and EV charging and the mobility sites, but there's so many different ways to contribute. I've even been thinking sort of corporate relations, and I love that customer facing element of my current role, and thinking, oh, how can we represent Shell in a positive light? How can we build our relationships with government, with different stakeholders? So there's lots of really interesting areas. I think things like even social investment, which I sort of didn't even realize again was a part of Shell, that Shell did anything in that area. But actually, talking with the country chair teams, there's so many different really impactful projects that Shell are not only just investing in and giving money to, anyone with cash can just give it to a charitable initiative. But what Shell are doing is actively working with those charities and using our knowledge to do good in the world. So things like training more girls to be in STEM careers, all of these different things. I find those really interesting. But to answer your question, I'm not exactly sure yet. I would love to move abroad. I've been looking into a program where you can go do 18-month assignments in a completely different continent. So move to Houston, move to Asia, which would be ideal as a next step. But yeah, I'm not sure. That's the problem of Shell. There's too many different things to choose from.
It certainly sounds as though the world's your oyster, and it does sound as though CNN and Penguin Publishing are well out of your thinking now. And it appears it. So far, we've really covered just a small part of you, really, sort of leaving University of Edinburgh and joining the Shell grad program. But I imagine in your experiences, there have been maybe some learnings to share other young graduates or younger people, or is there a learning, something that you would give advice to, something that maybe has been challenging or difficult, went wrong, that you've taken some experience from and could share on to our podcast listeners?
I think the main thing that I have learnt over the last 2.5 years is really to believe in yourself and have confidence in your abilities, which again sounds slightly cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, and it's because it actually makes such an impact. And I think it's so easy as someone earlier on in their career, as a female, to undermine your own knowledge, your own opinions, and to sort of put yourself in the back of the room. And I think actually building up the confidence to speak on things that you do have experience on and that you do have some kind of qualification and expertise on, I think is the best way of getting yourself noticed, of making an impact, of actually doing something. You don't do anything or achieve anything in your career if you just sit in the back of the room all the time. And I think having that confidence to put yourself out there has been really key. I think one example of that recently, I decided to host, I think it was about 40 of my account managers from Eurocar Parts and Shell Centre, and leading a day's worth of content, presenting to so many people, building up those relationships, learning to coach others. As a 24-year-old, it feels quite silly that you're trying to coach people, but having that confidence. And I think had I not had all these experiences at Shell thus far, I don't feel like I would have been in a position where I could have put myself forward for that sort of thing, made it happen myself. No one was asking me to do it, but having the initiative and the confidence to actually act on that, I think gets you far.
Well, it does. I mean, where does the confidence come from, though?
I'm naturally quite a bubbly person. I think it's just my personality type, but the confidence comes from, you build it up slowly, I think. So when I was much younger, I used to do a lot of singing and musical theatre, and now I'm in choirs, and I used to do debating and public speaking. I've always been encouraged to have opinions, and I think if you have something to say, then that will help you have the confidence to actually say it. I think it's easy to feel not confident if you don't have anything to give. And part of it is people do actually have lots to give and they don't realise it. But it's also just getting that experience in and finding opportunities like this, for example, that allows you to express your opinions and to build up that confidence. And then I think when you see the results of when you've done something that you found a bit nerve-wracking or that you're a bit worried about initially, and you've seen that pay off and do well, hopefully, then that again just adds to your bank of confidence for the next time you need to do something. And the more you do it, like any kind of muscle or skill, the better at it you'll become.
Yeah. I mean, I really like the advice. I really like the advice you give there. For some, it's far more difficult to be that confident, overt person. Some people are clearly a little bit more anxious. Some carry some neurodiversity, which makes that kind of difficult. But I agree with what your advice to people is. It's give it a go. give it a go.
Yeah.
And within giving it a go, you'll learn as you're doing, and your confidence will grow, and you'll be prepared to do that. And for me, listening into this conversation, it sounds as though you found an environment where your voice is heard, and that should be credit to the people that you work with and that you're around, because it's very easy to put down the newer voice. So it's great that you feel comfortable, and it's great that the environment you're working in is allowing you to take forward the things that you're passionate about. Because I think sometimes the perverseness in this whole space is that we want people who are passionate and energetic and have an opinion. And as soon as they come into an organization, we start to mold them into something they're not. But it's great that you feel that you're in that space, that you can do that. So, Sophie, I really want to thank you for joining us. We've covered a lot of ground, and some of your experiences will resonate so greatly with people listening into our podcast. The fact that you bring this whole difference around the graduate scheme, the gender piece, the energy transition piece, I think is going to be fascinating for people to listen to. People will probably want to reach out to you and speak to you and connect with you and learn all more about you. Where can they find you? How might they do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So if you just look up Sophie Wand or maybe Sophie Wand Shell, hopefully there's not too many of me's out there. Feel free to reach out, and always very happy to have lots of conversations.
Sophie, thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Blend. Be sure to follow us to catch next and future episodes as we continue to explore the people within the lubricant market.